Good afternoon, guys. Today's the title is What Dementia Does to the Brain. Okay, so here we go with today's discussion A. There is a moment when in many families, dementia stories, when the disease crosses the inevitable threshold, a daughter walks into a room smiling, hopeful, carrying the familiar rhythm of a lifelong relationship. And her mother looks at her with the polite confusion reserved for strangers. It is a moment that feels like a small death, even though the person is still physically present. To understand why this happens, we have to look inside the brain, not metaphorically, but anatomically, at the slow, relentless unraveling of the neural networks that make recognition, memory, and identity possible. The brain as a map of relationships, even relation, every every relationship we have is stored not in a single memory box, but in a vast consolidation of circuits. The hippocampus binds faces to names, names to histories, histories to meaning. The amygdala tags the tags tags those memories with emotion, warmth, safety, love. The frontal cortex integrates all of it into a coherent sense of this person matters to me. Dementia does not erase these circuits all at once. It erodes them slowly, like a tide wearing down a shoreline. At first, the changes are subtle, a forgotten appointment, a misplaced word, a moment of disorientation. But beneath the surface, neurons are dying, synapses are disconnecting, and the architecture of identity is beginning to fracture. The first breaks, memory and meaning, in Alzheimer's disease, the most common cause of dementia. The earliest damage occurs in the hippocampus. Beta amyloid plaques accumulate between neurons. Tau tangles choke the cells from within, and the brain's communication pathways begin to fail. This is why early dementia often looks like simple forgetfulness, but it is not simple. It is the beginning of a structural collapse in the system responsible for forming new memories and retrieving old ones. As the disease spreads outward into the temporal and parallel lobes, the brain loses the ability to connect a face to story, a story to a relationship to a sense of self. The person may still know they should know you. They may even say your name, but the emotional recognition, the deep familiarity begins to flicker. When recognition fails, the moment a parent no longer recognizes their child is not caused by a single lesion or a sudden event. It is the accumulation of years of microscopic injury. Recognition requires a coordinated network. Visual processing to interpret the face. Memory retrieval to match the face to a person. Emotional tagging to understand the relationship. Identity integration to place that relationship within itself, within the self. Dementia dismantles this network piece by piece. When the hippocampus can no longer retrieve the memory of a daughter's face, and the amygdala can no longer attach emotional meaning to it, the brain defaults to neutrality. The daughter becomes a nice woman, a helper, or someone familiar but not known. This is not forgetting in the everyday sense. It is the neurological inability to access the relationship at all. The personality that changes along the way, long before recognition disappears. Personality begins to shift. The frontal lobes, responsible for empathy, impulse control, social judgment, and emotional regulation, weaken. A gentle parent, A gentle parent may become irritable. A private person may become disinhibited. A warm, attentive spouse may become withdrawn or, or suspicious. These changes are not moral failings, they are symptoms of structural brain injury. When the circuits that regulate behavior degrade, the person loses the ability to act according to their lifelong values. Families often describe this stage as the most painful because the person seems present but altered, familiar and unfamiliar at once. The, the final stage, the, the disassembly of the self. As dementia advances, the brain shrinks, entire, entire regions lose volume, the cortex thins, the, uh, the ventricles widen, the networks that once supported language, memory, movement, and emotion collapse. Eventually, the disease reaches the areas responsible for basic bodily functions: swallowing, mobility, sleep, wake cycles. The person becomes fully dependent on the person becomes fully dependent, not because they are unwilling, but because the brain can no longer coordinate the tasks required for independence. By the time recognition disappears entirely, the disease has already dismantled much of the person's cognitive identity. What remains is the emotional core, often fragile, sometimes surprisingly resilient, but no longer anchored to the relationships that once defined their life. Why this moment hurts so much. When a mother no longer knows her child, the loss is not only neurological, it is relational, external, and symbolic. It represents the serving of a severing of a bond that once felt unbreakable. But it is important to remember the love did not disappear. the brain did. The relationship existed fully and richly for decades. Dementia does not erase its history, it only erases the brain's ability to access it. Families often carry the memory of the relationship forward, holding it for both people until the end. What families survive? What helps families survive this? Accepting that the changes are neurological, not intentional. Shifting from correcting to connecting. Using sensory cues, music, touch, familiar objects to invoke emotional memory. Simplifying environments to reduce cognitive load. Seeking support early, not late. Allowing grief to coexist with caregiving. Dementia is not only a disease of memory, it's a disease of identity, relationship, and meaning. But families can still create moments of connection even when recognition is gone through presence, gentleness, and emotional attunement. Okay, guys, that is your A. I will be back on after a little break with B. Until then, Gator Wellness, take care, folks.